When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.
He likes movies, we like movies. Septum Sin versus the world. Septum Sin versus the world. Septum Sin versus the world. Septum Sin versus the world.
I'd buy that for $1.
Hello, and welcome to another Vlogcast by the greatest entertainers in our business, in our own minds anyway, for Septum Sin versus the world. I am, of course, your host, Septum Sin, and this here is Kotobuki Jake.
Hola.
And we are here to inform you about many, many things, and mostly what we've been watching, maybe some news, all within your lovely story time hour. So we've decided that we are going to be doing something different because we have both been powering through anime movies left and right.
Indeed.
And in preparation for our list. So on the week before we do the list, we are going to do a video covering all the research that we have done. It may not be. You might not see any of the ones that we have on the list. You might see one or two that are on the lists. But it'll be the research that we haven't covered here on a previous vlogcast, or stuff that, we already know very well. Like, I doubt I'll watch Perfect Blue again. I've already watched it like 4 times, and once recently for Inside Movies Galore, so it'll probably not be there, and it may not even be on my list. I do have it written up. Well, no, I don't, because I've still got lots of research left to do.
Right.
But that cuts out like 90% of my list, so this will be shorter. We could probably fit it into the hour. Most of this will probably be your hour.
We'll have a look. We'll find out.
But I'll go ahead and drop my one that I have started, which is a little series on Netflix called Slasher. Now, Dustin from our Inside Movies Galore crew had encouraged this, and it really does. It reminds me a lot of the Scream TV series that MTV did, a little bit better. It's kind of a combination of that and an American Horror Story. Pretty good stuff. A person moves to this house. Apparently, as in Halloween, a killer goes in, kills her parents, leaves infant her alive. So she's finally moving back into the house that her parents had settled with her husband, and people start dying. Gotta wonder what's going on.
You gotta wonder.
So, what have you been starting, been reading, been doing all of that, anything and everything but finished?
Well, the only thing I have listed as started is closely tied to something that's finished, so I'll come back to it. But I do have some ongoing. I have been powering through Season 2 of Arrow and getting a fair bit watched. I'm enjoying it. It's a good show. I returned to Kimi ni Todoke from Me to You. I will come back in a moment to the reason why I came back to it after a delay. But it's a fun show as well. I think I already discussed part 1, did I? So I'll save that until later. And I've done some reading. I have been working hard on Naruto. I actually got up, I just finished the part where Naruto and Gaara had their big standoff, and where Itachi has come back to town. So, still early in the series, but, getting some stuff done there. And I also knocked out additional volumes of Skip Beat and My Hero Academia, so those are some those are all great series. They're all fun reads, and looking forward to getting some more of that done. And like I said, the one that I started is I'm gonna wait until Well, we'll go ahead and launch into the rest. I started reading Rich People Problems, which is the third book in Kevin Kwan's Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. The one I finished was China Rich Girlfriend, which, basically the second book focuses a lot on basically, the main couple from the first book. You got Rachel and Nicholas, and in the second book you meet Rachel's family, like her actual birth family that she had not even known about. You also do see more of the initial thing, like Nicholas's family and all that, but you also dive much more into Astrid's family and a couple of characters who were fairly incidental in the first book, Kitty Pong particularly. So they kind of, if you enjoyed the first book, you'll enjoy probably the rest of the series. I've only read a little bit of Rich People Problems, but it looks like it's off to the same basic idea, slightly different focus, slightly different characters focused on, but still, it's a fun write. Kwan's got a fun writing style, so it's pretty good. And then I guess you should go ahead and do one.
Well, the only things I have are things that I finished. I don't do ongoing. I don't do. Once I have introduced you to it, I really am not going to say anything until I get to the end, because I don't know if I'm going to finish it. So once I've finished, then I get back to you. So I am watching and listening to stuff and reading stuff, but I've already told you about that before.
Right.
There are 2 Inside Movies Galore films that I think we've watched together.
Well,
you might have
together, but yeah.
I think you've managed to. You might have the one from the previous week that you ended up watching, because you usually watch them on the Tuesday, or at least after, because you pick it up for me some of the time.
Right.
So did you do one before Katie's Choice?
Well, the one before Katie's Choice was my choice, which was Akira.
And
so
yeah, did we cover that last week?
Well, I mentioned I had actually watched that one well in advance, but I did watch the English dub after we recorded this, so that is on my list for this one.
So we go ahead and start with that one, I guess. And go ahead and tell us what your thoughts are on the English dub.
I thought it was pretty interesting. It was well done, or reasonably well done at least. I still prefer the Japanese dub, but it definitely, you could do worse.
Yeah.
And people have done worse. But that was, I think I had 3 directly from Inside Movies Galore during this time period. That was one of them.
Well, the other 2, and I'll go ahead with the next one, and
Right.
then which was Night Riders, which was Katie's choice.
Yeah.
And it was about a traveling Renaissance fair that used motorcycles.
Exactly.
And it was by the person who did Night of the Living Dead.
And starred Ed Harris, of all people, in his first major film role.
It was interesting. I give it that.
It was.
I
I actually kind of liked it.
felt it was a bit long.
Yeah, it was a bit long, and it meandered like nobody's business during the second and third acts, but, and then, of course, we had Dave's choice, Mr. Sardonicus, which I also surprisingly liked. But, yeah, and then as a bonus to that, he had a double feature, which featured another William Castle film called Homicidal, so I knocked that one out as well.
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
And so what did you think of... Well, why don't we'll start one at a time. Let's talk about... well, you can hear about Mr. Sardonicus on this.
We talked
so let's
at
talk
length
about
on that.
Homicidal. What did you think about that one?
I didn't like it as much. It was interesting. It got a little...
Weird twist at the end.
It was kind of a weird twist at the end.
Was I the only one who didn't quite feel like I got how they got there?
To be honest, I think I slept through a few minutes of the movie, so probably missed something myself.
Well, it's just very weird.
Right.
The ending comes and it feels. I mean, I can sort of feel it, but at the time maybe I need to watch it again. It just.
Yeah.
I didn't quite connect the dots, and I still don't quite connect the dots.
Right.
I know where they're coming with it, and I felt like they did a semi-okay job. I just feel like the execution was flawed.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one that could benefit from a remake. I don't understand why they always think we need to take a good film and we need to remake the good film, and we're going to make a terrible film in the guise of that good film. Why not take a terrible film, something notoriously bad, that's not even bad in a good way, that's bad in a way that no one wants to watch it, and then retake that so that it's something watchable and enjoyable.
I wouldn't say Homicidal was that bad.
No, it wasn't. But
yeah.
you know, but you get what I'm saying. What if they took artifacts and made artifacts into something entertaining?
That'd be impressive.
It would, but you know, it would be worth. I would be interested to see, like, you know, if somebody did a remake of Artifacts and people were like praising it, I would be like, really? Okay, I gotta check this out. You know?
Right.
But let's go. I'll go with the last one, which is this week's. It's not gonna be this week. It's probably gonna be because this won't even go up until. We'll have gone through this and another one on top of it. We'll have gone through our starting in July, and which will have been Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which neither one of us have.
When this goes up, we'll be that far into it?
Yep, because this Friday, remember, is the other top 10 list.
Yeah.
So it's going to actually move very quickly over. So yeah, we'll have watched Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon by that time, and but this time is going to be a movie called Barfly. I'm doing this for multiple reasons. I had the choice because my birthday is coming up. I will be turning 40.
Yeah.
And Barfly is one that my father would show me constantly as a child. So it's also kind of a cheap Father's Day gift because I'm really strapped for cash right now. You know, we could really use those like several thousand subscribers to come in so I could get some YouTube revenue going. Hint, hint. Come on. Subscribe. But Barfly is a tale about a real person, about a poet and novelist, taking place during his Barfly days. And it is an interesting tale. It's one you don't hear much about. You don't see much about it when you talk about Mickey Rourke or Faye Dunaway. This is not the movie you think about when you talk about these people. So,
isn't it? I feel like I've heard it frequently used in conjunction with Rourke.
Well, you know, again, it's not one that comes to mind very often. I don't hear it much other than me talking about it. So I don't know. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will think the wrestler usually.
Well, yeah.
And so, I know you haven't watched it yet, but you will have watched it by the time
I will
this
have
goes up.
watched it, yes, by then, and we will have discussed it by then. So my next small group of films have one thing in common, and that is that they were released last year. And actually, a couple of them were ones that I was poised to talk about last Vlogcast, but we had to do a very short video and just didn't get to them. And the first of those was I did get to see Mary Poppins Returns, which was pretty good. Pretty good. I think it was a lot. It was a lot like the original in a lot of ways. Probably more than they really should have done. Even the animated sequences, they I was actually kind of impressed that they seemed to go back and kind of, I won't say copy, but very closely mirrored a lot of the animation style from the original film. Emily Blunt does a fine job playing Mary Poppins, supposedly plays her closer to the book than the original version, which P.L. Travers never cared much for. It was a fun film. Lin-Manuel Miranda does a fine job in basically the Dick Van Dyke role from the original film. And Van Dyke himself shows up very late in the film for a amusing and short cameo. And you get to see Colin Firth as a smarmy villain. So, it's overall, it's not bad. Have you seen that one yet? Or?
I have it, but I have yet to...
Yeah.
It's not one I have been prioritizing. It's... Well, I've got a lot of priorities this month, and that's not one of them.
And one of the ones that came out last year that was a priority for me, and I was very happy to get hold of it from the library, that, I almost talked about last time, but I wanted to make sure I really had time to launch into it. I did get to see Bad Times at the El Royale, which is a fun movie. It's by Drew Goddard, the guy who did Cabin in the Woods, and it's basically you have a hotel called the El Royale that straddles the California-Nevada line. Like, I think it's in the Tahoe area, and that's I can't remember if it's based on an actual, but I think there is at least one hotel out there that does that. But they're on hard times. The hotel is a shell of its former glory, if you will. And into this, you have a handful of very disparate characters. You have a preacher who's played by Jeff Bridges. You have a singer who is played by Cynthia Erivoto or something. I don't remember her name. I think that's her name, Cynthia Erivoto. She was also in Widows. You've got a very, 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 very... she basically looks like or acts like a trashed 20-something, But it turns out that it's a little different, that she has a body in the trunk, who it turns out is her sister, who she has kidnapped. And she is played by Dakota Johnson, and her sister is played by Kylie Spaney, who's becoming fast becoming one of my favorites. And I can't remember who plays the guy, the bellhop / hotel manager / everything, because no one else works there anymore. And then you got John Hamm as a supposed salesman who you find out is actually a Fed. And there's also a charismatic cult leader played by Chris Hemsworth, and he has a connection to the two sisters. So that's like the basic plot setup. I'm not going to get into the plot because it's so twisty and turny and weird, and there's a lot of back and forth, and I've already given some minor spoilers, but I don't want to give any major spoilers. It's a very well-made movie. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I liked it a hell of a lot better than the Dakota Johnson film I watched just a few days later, which tune into our Inside Movies Galore discussion on Suspiria to hear my thoughts on that.
So before we get on, I had
Okay.
thought about this, and I meant to say this
What's
at the
that?
beginning. Because we're essentially doing some mini reviews here, one of the things I wanted to do after we talk about these is to say, one, do you recommend this to people, and who would you recommend out of our audience? Not specific people, obviously, though we know a few of you. Just like, what kind of person do you think that would like this film? Or do you feel like it's a good general recommendation?
Okay.
So I guess we can just start with this particular one, then go that way from here.
Because, I guess most people can probably guess where Mary Poppins would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bad Times at the El Royale, there's a little bit of a From Dusk Till Dawn vibe in a lot of ways. Definitely a little bit of the Cabin in the Woods vibe. There's a little bit of a Tarantino feel, maybe. It's bloody, but it's not very bloody. Like, there's a few scenes, but it's not particularly gory or anything. So if you're into that kind of thing, like sort of like shady people, kind of a lot of talking, a little bit of brutal action, that sort of thing. Obviously not for kids, but generally I would say if you're like a fan of Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino or Drew Goddard, you would enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, I have a double that I wanted to go ahead and put on because we were doing these Castle ones, and I have 2 Castle double features. The other one is 13 Ghosts paired with 13 Frightened Girls, and they are nothing alike, by the way. Just that they're both by William Castle. And 13 Ghosts was one of the films that Dark Castle Entertainment, which was the reason why they named it that, is that they were remaking Castle films. And it is a shame that they dropped that. Because William Castle has a beautiful library, and I was enjoying them. And I really did like the remake. I considered the remake much scarier. But 13 Ghosts, the original, was shot in a unique way. Of course, like the remake, if those of you who have watched it, a family hard on their luck inherit the house from this weird, estranged relative. And this guy has this habit of trying to commune and collect ghosts. So, a lot of it is sort of a mystery. It's a lot like the House on Haunted Hill. For those of you who really like the original House on Haunted Hill, this is very similar. But it has some interesting mechanics that in the theater I could imagine would go over very cool, which involved these special glasses. You know how 3D glasses are. You got like the blue one and you got the red one.
Right.
So you would have these viewers, and you could look either through the blue or the red. If you look through the red, you could see the ghosts during these particular parts of the movie. But if you look through the blue, you wouldn't see any ghosts reflected in that part of the movie. So a very cool feature, especially back in the time that this was being released. Now, would I recommend it generally? No, I think that a lot of audiences who are into the current horror trend, and I can think of a few, even one in particular on our channel, who would be bored by the pace. But people who really like a good old horror film, people who liked House on Haunted Hill, people who are into Castle in general would love 13 Ghosts. And if you have seen the remake and you are curious, this is not a bad thing to watch. It is something kind of cool, just to pick out what's similar and what's not, like I did with the original House on Haunted Hill. Now, 13 Frightened Girls is a horse of a different color. Castle does not do the narrative, which is very different from the other ones I've seen. Castle actually is kind of more of a guy who stands by. So this one,
bystander.
This one actually feels more like a Hitchcockian suspense film, where you have these girls who are all going to this UN academy. So they're all basically daughters of diplomats, and this one girl ends up going to visit her friend who is Chinese at the racial stereotype
Oh God.
place that she lives. She's a daughter of a Chinese diplomat.
Yeah.
So, and then she ends up seeing that, ending up accidentally seeing her father basically kill somebody. So she takes the evidence and turns it in. And one of the guys she secretly likes is a spy, and he's kind of down on his luck. He's not catching people. So she decides she's going to become a spy herself and use her connections with all of her friends at the UN to spy on all of these agencies, going by the name Kitten. And eventually she realizes that being a spy isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's quite a dangerous game. Now, would I recommend this? To most people who want horror, probably not. To those people who love Alfred Hitchcock, most genuinely, yes. This is very Hitchcockian. It's very much a film that feels like it's in that vein. It reminds me a lot of The Man Who Knew Too Much. If you know that one. It has a lot of that vibe to it. It does have a lot of good suspense in it. Again, it's an older film, so it does have a slower burn. You got to be able to see through some of the stereotypes. You got to look at the fact that this is an older film. But it's not all that bad. And it's well worth a check out.
See, that might be an example of something where you might look at remaking films where the worst thing about them is that the filmmakers were a product of their times. Like, I mean, I'm sure to a lot of people it would be blasphemy to even think about remaking Breakfast at Tiffany's, but come on, that whole thing with Mickey Rooney's character... they need to do that film without that character.
Yeah, that might be a good list that we could do together. Like 15 films that could use a remake to help, like, good films that could use a remake due to not being good, not holding up so well today.
Yes.
So, like the jazz singer.
Yes. So, yeah, or actually, I was thinking about that yesterday, like White Christmas, has that whole minstrel show program that was like... but anyway...
But none of them came out in blackface.
Yeah, I don't think they did. Yeah, that would have been worse. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead real quick. Well, not necessarily real quick, but quickly. Finish off the ones from last year. Last night, I was talking about a slow burn. I watched a film last night by Karen Kusama called Destroyer. And Kusama, of course, is the director that put Michelle Rodriguez on the map with Girl Fight, which is a great film. And she did a not-so-great film that was interesting called Jennifer's Body. But Destroyer, she takes Nicole Kidman, who plays a undercover cop who, along with her undercover cop boyfriend, who's played by Sebastian Stan, they infiltrate a ring of bank robbers, and a job goes horribly wrong. Her boyfriend is killed in the thing, and she makes off with some money that they were going to take some money and retire together after it all blew over, and it goes poorly. And she ends up, she actually, I don't think she told him, I may have slept through the part where she did, but I don't think she had told him that she was actually pregnant with his kid. So she ends up having this kid, but she's so completely prisoner to her demons, ghosts from the past, that she basically spends the next 16 years in living hell until the bank robber who had basically ruined the whole thing in the first place resurfaces, and she goes after him. And so it's basically a revenge flick, but it's a very, 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 very slow burn. It made a lot of reviewers' year-end best-of lists. A lot of people were talking about Kusama as a director to watch, one of the reasons why female directors need more work. A lot of people were talking about Kidman as one of the best roles of her career, and she does do a great job. But it's a hard film to watch, and it was so slow. I did sleep through part of it, but it was really good.
So would you recommend this to general audiences?
Not general audiences, but if you like a good revenge flick, if you like procedural dramas, if you like particularly ones that are dark and have a bit of a bite to them, or if you're just into acting, like you or let's say you're a huge Nicole Kidman fan and you believe that she has always been just underrated as an actress, then yeah, you gotta watch the film, definitely. Another film that showcased actors who don't always get their due was Stan and Ollie, which saw Steve Coogan and and John C. Reilly as Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, who, Laurel and Hardy. And I'm not familiar with Laurel and Hardy myself. I don't know their stuff all that well. I just know them more by name and reputation. But the film basically chronicles the latter years of their career. And it does a really good job of presenting them as a couple of performers who really, really, really do like and respect each other. And they do what they want to do, but what they want to do, sadly, is not in very high demand anymore. And they're basically sort of the echo, if you will, of the vaudeville era. And it was very interesting. And actually, I think both John C. Reilly and Nicole Kidman did manage the Golden Globe nods for these two films, but they were basically overlooked at the Oscars. But Stan and Ollie was a lot of fun, and I think it would play well with fans of Laurel and Hardy. Definitely, I grew up more with Abbott and Costello, and I got a little bit of appreciation for it. There's actually one part where Laurel is sitting there just kind of enviously staring at a Abbott and Costello poster, and it's like, They definitely did make a little more success, I'm afraid. But you've seen a little bit of the duo, right?
Yeah. I've seen which one? I've seen a little bit of both.
Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, I've got a collection of theirs.
Very good.
But would you recommend it to a general audience?
Well,
I've been curious about it.
I wouldn't say general, because I don't think it would play well with people that need a lot of action or horror. But if you like, basic character dramas, if you like, there is a lot of comedy. There is a fair bit of comedy. If you're a fan of Coogan or Riley, you'd probably appreciate it. And definitely, it definitely people that like biopics and that kind of stuff, it would play well with them. And I do want to mention one of the most phenomenal films of the year. This was an Oscar nominee for foreign language feature, and it was, I believe, a Lebanese film, and it was a film called Capernaum. And Capernaum is freaking awesome, and it's an absolutely heartbreaking film. It is really, really hard to watch, but it does have a surprising amount of humor. Like, it mostly centers on this one young kid who is, I think, about 12 or so. He doesn't know for sure because his parents don't have any papers for him. And when the film starts, he is in court. He is doing time. He is doing a 5-year prison sentence for stabbing a guy. And actually, one of the funnier parts in the film is they ask him about this. They're clarifying about this, and he's like, so you're doing 5 years for stabbing someone, correct? Yes, I stabbed a son of a bitch. So to clarify, you stabbed someone. Yes, a son of a bitch. He is very adamant on that point. And he is in court because he is trying to sue his parents for having him. Basically, his parents are a couple of... They live on the fringes of society. They refuse any paperwork or any dealings with the government. And they have a lot of kids. And the reason he stabbed a son of a bitch is because they basically sold his younger sister into sexual slavery in order to pay the rent, basically. And he was furious about this. He was so furious he ran away from home and took up with an immigrant who had a young son, and she adopts him basically as a son, but then she disappears. And he doesn't know why. It turns out she's in prison, but he blames her. He thinks all people are callous and selfish, and he gets this jaded belief that people should stop having children. And he basically goes to court to sue his parents for having so many kids. And it's a very interesting premise for the film, but it gets really, 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 really dark and gritty. It spends most of its time in the slums and on the streets in this area. Again, I think in Lebanon, and there's a lot of there's talk about the Syrian refugees and all this kind of stuff, and just really, really good film, really powerful film. Like I said, there is some levity to it, but yeah, not an easy one.
So who would be the audience for this one?
For kids. No. No, actually, this is one of those ones I would recommend.
Expecting parents.
Republicans. Well, expecting Republicans. Well, it's one that if you're a fan of foreign cinema and you're willing to sit and watch subtitles and you can take a heavy film, absolutely, you gotta watch it. If you just are curious about the rest of the world, if you're interested in the kind of films that show you something you would not see in American cinema, then I would definitely recommend it. But I do recommend that you don't watch it when you're in a very bad, sad mood or what have you. Yeah.
So I'll cover two films that I have done reviews for on our channel. So you can check these out. You can just type them in. They're not a lot of... Oddly enough, there are not a ton of reviews for either of these films, so mine won't be that hard to find. The first one is Camp Blood Kills. I talked a little bit about this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. It is essentially a best-of list. Best of kills from Camp Blood Movie 3. I'm not talking about Into the Woods. I'm talking about Camp Blood 3. Basically after Brad Sykes was exorcised from the series, which is very sad. And if you want to see a really awesome interview with Brad Sykes, with yours truly involved, and I thought this way, by the way, before I met Brad Sykes, so you can check this out. But Camp Blood Kills does have almost all of the awesome kills from those movies, all the way up through basically the 8th movie or a side movie. David Sterling is kind of... Ghost of Camp Blood was considered the 8th film, but now he's kind of saying, I think it's a side film, so it's whatever you say. Plus two others, The Occultist and Axe Grinder. Now we're going to get back to The Occultist, and I have yet to see Axe Grinder. I need to get the money, because though I could watch it streaming-wise, I would like to see the artists get some money on these films. So, would I recommend Camp Blood Kills to a general audience? No. I'm wondering if any of these are going to recommend well to a general audience. But if you like these types of slasher movies, if you like low-budget slashers, and you're the kind of person who just wants to get right to the kills, and in some cases the boobs, this is the best way to do it. The Occultist, which was one of the two outliers, I also did a review on, and I wasn't as happy with that one. It's about this group of people in a school who are teaching these kind of dark artsy stuff in relation to surgery. And so they're trying to basically do illegal surgery on people in order to try and summon Satan. And
lovely.
Lots of blood, lots of gore. I'm not sure you would want to sit through this particular one.
Doesn't sound like it.
Or Camp Blood Kills, for that matter. I don't think either one of these would recommend to you.
Didn't you give me a copy of Camp Blood Kills?
I think I did. And Camp Blood Kills does have one special thing, and Camp Blood 9 is also going to have this, is I have a special thanks credit not only on the box, but in the movie itself.
Right.
So, you know, it's kind of cool to have that. But as far as The Occultist, probably not. Who would I recommend that to? Really and truly, you gotta be one of these people, I think, who really likes this low-budget, gory thing. And don't care as much about story, don't care as much about kind of the pacing. Basically, if you're the kind of person who loves the films that kind of move to the gore and don't pay as much attention to the other aspects, this is probably good for you.
Good for you.
Yeah. If you like this movie, I am kind of glad. I'm sure that there are people out there that really love this movie. I really want to hear from you what it is about this that makes it special to you. So, of course, let us know in the comments.
Indeed. All right. And I've actually seen 3 of this year's releases during this time frame. And one of them is one that I, again, was poised to talk about last time we met, and I was really jazzed about it, and now it's a couple weeks later. But it's still a freaking awesome movie. It came out in this country right at the start of the year, but I think technically it's up for this year's consideration regardless. It's the new film from Asghar Farhadi, the Iranian director who did A Separation and Fireworks Wednesday and The Salesman and some other stuff. And it's called Everybody Knows. And it is his Spanish language debut. It's and it stars Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz. And of course, I've forgotten most of the character names between then and now, so bear with me. So basically, it takes place in a small Spanish village, and there's a family that is having a wedding. And the person in the family getting married is the youngest of 3 sisters. The middle sister is the one played by Cruz, who has lived for the past 16 years or so in Argentina. And she and her 2 children, her daughter is about 15 and her son is much younger. They come back to Spain for the wedding. They make the excuses for the husband. He can't make it because of work and whatnot. And Bardem plays a guy who's in a relationship with another woman they run a vineyard. They run a vineyard together, and they got the land for the vineyard from the father of Cruz's character. And basically, you learn it's much more complicated than that. I'm not going to go too much into plot because there's some spoilers to be had. But basically, at the beginning of the film, it kind of rambles between all the characters. There are a lot of characters. And it kind of introduces everyone, but it does so in like a very natural and organic way. You just kind of meet everyone. You kind of get an idea of a lot of their relationships and what have you. And you learn, there's 2 people conspicuously absent, the husband in Argentina, but there's also a young lady who works for the oldest sister who's part of the family, basically, and her boyfriend is supposedly run off to Germany. And so I'm not going to say why that's important, but suffice it to say the 2 that are absent are not truly absent from the story. And early on you learn about one of the reasons why the film might be called Everybody Knows is that back in the day Cruz and Bardem had a thing for each other and everyone knows about it. And it's just like really, really, it's like an open secret and whatnot. But there's another open secret that's not quite so open and a little more secret for certain parties. And that becomes very important because during the middle of the wedding, when this house full of people, the daughter goes missing. And it comes out that she was abducted. And all sorts of threats are made. It basically turns into a kidnapping drama But this is not Taken. This is a very, 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 very different sort of film. And it's a film where theoretically, this is a big spoiler, but I'm going to try and be as oblique about it as I can. It has an ending that could be considered a happy ending. And if it was a Hollywood film, it would have been. But it's not a Hollywood film. And I could see, you could read the ending as being absolutely heartbreaking. So I loved it. I love that kind of, I absolutely love the film. I won't say it's as good as A Separation, but it's up there. It's really freaking good.
You'd recommend to general audiences?
I would say if you have an appreciation for a good film, yes, I would recommend it.
Even for like children?
Not for children. Teens and older.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're watching a kidnapping drama in the first place, especially one with subtitles, more power to you if you could do that at 10, but But I think for older teens and adults, definitely. But if you are a fan of Farhadi or Cruz or Bardem, it's absolutely essential viewing. If you just like Spanish cinema in general, it's definitely worth, or international cinema in general, definitely worth a watch. And if it's not up for a bunch of Oscars this year, I'm going to be,
So, one that I came up on, that I was doing research for the anime list on, and then realized, crap, this is actually Korean, was Satellite Girl and Milk Cow. Which I wanted to see anyway, so I'm not going to be, too sad about it.
With a title like that, how could you not want to?
So, essentially, and this has been covered on here before, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here. It was about this guy, and apparently whenever these people get brokenhearted, they turn into barnyard animals. And they get basically a couple of options. One, they can try and live out their lives as the barnyard animals. 2, they could be burned up by this thing called the incinerator. Or 3, they could basically spend their lives as just basic animals forever, living with this witch. Now, he has helped out. This guy who turned into a cow is a musician, and this satellite that turned into a girl actually fell in love with him through his music. So he, with the help of her and a magical roll of toilet paper, must combat the evil forces that would harvest his organs, or and of course try and take out the incinerator once and for all. Now, it's a bit odd, but it's a fairly decent one. I think that people of all ages could watch this and get enjoyment out of.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually might be able to recommend this to general audiences.
Yes.
It might be a little bit too weird for some people, but I do think that the most people will be able to get some enjoyment out of this film. So I would recommend this widely, for the most part.
Did you watch the short film that came with it?
Oh, I watched that a long time ago.
Yeah.
I've had that one for a long time. Coffee Machine Sandwich, that was pretty good. So, as it is, I think that is a worthwhile film for all.
Yep, good times. So, the other two from this year are both notable in that they're both the third in a franchise. I watched How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, which is really good. It's a really good film. The How to Train Your Dragon films in general are really good.
So how would you recommend that one? I mean, would you consider that one the best of the three, or do you... I know for me,
It's hard to say.
2 is my favorite.
It's hard to say. I need to go back and rewatch them. To be honest, when I watched the second one, I was very tired. I need to rewatch it. I have both of them. I need to just sit down and make
I'm waiting for price drops.
Yes. And then, but it is an excellent film. I love the ending. I do believe they've clearly stepped up their game on the animation department since the first film. And it's just generally a fun one. And I do recommend those films to a wide audience. They're based on a series of kids' books that are super popular. popular with the kids in our library. But it's one of those ones. I mean, DreamWorks is really good at kind of aiming for all ages, without,
It's a series that surprised
Yeah.
me in how good it was. It really showed that DreamWorks, past like I think Shrek,
Right.
had the ability to compete with the mouse.
Right.
Of course, which also shows you can't really compete
Well,
with the
they-
mouse at the end of the day. But
They're
you
also
can
the
try.
ones, aren't they also the ones behind Kung Fu Panda?
They are.
Those are fun movies too. But I do like How to Train Your Dragon a little better. And the other one, the third in a franchise, was M. Night Shyamalan's Glass.
Ah.
Very different film from the...
Also recommended to everybody.
Yes, and I made a huge mistake. I have Unbreakable, and I have Split, and I really wanted to rewatch them right before I watched Glass, and I completely forgot. And so now I'll probably just end up sitting on them until I get Glass, which might be another year or so or two, because I'm not paying more than $8 for that film, and probably no more than $5.
I've heard it was disappointing.
It is, but not as bad as I thought it would be. The thing is, it's kind of hard to do a big twist in this film because you're building on two films that already did that.
Yeah.
And they do have some twists in there, and there is some interesting little... the way that Shyamalan decides to combine the two... The Bruce Willis character's trajectory with James McAvoy's character's trajectory... there is a little bit of minor retconning there that I thought was an interesting little plot device. The biggest thing that I found disappointing was that Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Casey, I think her name is, that was the survivor girl from the first one, seems to have developed Stockholm Syndrome, because in this one she is very attached to McAvoy's character, which surprised me, and I thought that was kind of like, I don't know about that. And then, of course, Sarah Paulson plays the putative shrink who's trying to convince these three. You've got the, McAvoy's character, Bruce Willis's character, and Sam Jackson's character trying to convince them that there's no such thing as superheroes and that they're all, And actually, I guess the big twist comes in finding out that who's really right,
Yeah.
I guess. It was a good movie. It was disappointing. It could have been better, but I kind of liked it. Yeah.
So I have a couple of anime that I have watched again that have been one of which I had thought about pulled again by accident, but this one is anime, but it's not a feature,
Okay.
and that is Battle Angel.
Oh.
Oh, also, would you recommend Glass to general audience? I forgot to.
Well, I think you said it right at the beginning.
Well, yes, I did, general audience, but I didn't know.
I would not generally recommend any of Shyamalan's to just anybody. Just like Split and Unbreakable, Glass is a slow burn. Unbreakable is almost excruciatingly slow. It's a really good movie, but the pacing is so slow. I will say this, I thought Glass was better paced than either of the other two films. But it's still a slow-moving film. So if you've got to have a mile-a-minute action, you will be bored. But if you're interested in more of a slow burn kind of film, it is kind of an action film, but it's sort of like the cerebral action film.
Yeah.
And it is essentially a revisionist superhero film. So if you like that subgenre, the revisionist superheroes, I think you will probably get a lot of appreciation in Glass. It's not for absolutely everybody by any means, but...
Well, so there are two of them that I have that I did watch in preparation, in a way. One was Battle Angel, which of course people are all flocking to Alita. Whether you love it or hate it, people have seen it. A lot of them have.
I'm so annoyed I missed that in theaters.
But Battle Angel is essentially a couple like episodes about this this kind of dystopian future where you got the people who live in the nice fancy city up above, and then the people who live on the surface who are living in the trash life. And of course, this android was discovered by this guy who was down there, and he repaired her, and that was Alita. And so she ends up eventually taking on the mantle of Collector to try and help this guy she's fallen for to reach the castle up above. It doesn't end well. It's kind of dark in a lot of ways. It reminds me a lot of MTV's type of liquid television type stuff. And if you really liked that sort of thing, then this would be for you. General audiences need not apply on this one.
So you're talking some kind of an Eon Flux sort of thing?
Almost,
Okay.
in that way. A little bit better put together than I think Eon Flux was, but a lot like that. So, again, fairly well done, decent enough, but, it could have been longer.
Okay.
The other one was Sound Euphonium, which I watched both seasons that are out.
And now for something completely different.
Oh, it's identical to Battle Angel. Again, not one I would recommend to general audiences because of what it is. It's essentially an anime. It's a slice of life anime that develops around high school concert band. Now,
And this one time at band camp.
and this, of course, the show is it's around this instrument that you don't see a lot of high school bands using, which is the euphonium, which is a smaller version of the tuba, typically used in military bands. It's a tuba you can carry around with you. Has a slightly higher pitch, a little bit different from a French horn.
So it's not like that Woody Allen thing where he was in the marching band with the tuba.
No, he had the cello, and he was just
right,
trying to
the
set it
cello.
up, and he kept. But it's again, it's a fairly decent one. It reflects upon a bunch of characters. One character who outright insulted another character at the end of her 8th grade year, and as she went into high school, she wanted to try and figure out how to make it up to this person, and gets dragged into the band again, and into the competition to try and win nationals.
All right.
And it is a decent show. It has a lot of good interactions, well-developed characters, and an interesting story. I had to get the original series on European release because the Aniplex release is...
No, Pony Can.
The Pony Can... They're kind of the same thing. So the Pony Can release, you can get 2/3 of it for $150, and then the other third is out of print and impossible to find. So... it's the only way to really watch this other than the
So in
stream.
a year, I'll get it all on eBay for $200.
I will be, actually, yeah, that would probably be how you would do it. But the second one I did get for a decent price. And I showed that off in the pickups. Now, would I recommend it? I would recommend it to certain people. One, if you were ever in a high school band, this would probably be down your alley. You could get a lot of enjoyment out of that. If you like Slice of Life series, you would probably get some enjoyment out of this. I think those are worthwhile. Would I pay the exorbitant amounts? Probably not. Do I think that it has helped me with my experience for Liz and the Bluebird? Definitely. It gave me background on characters that I would have been going, and even background on the main 2 characters in that movie, which I will talk about more in another video later on.
As indeed I might.
You know what? We're both probably... I don't know how far down your list you've gotten.
Well,
but,
I have one more that I already bumped from last one that I definitely want to cover this time.
So why don't we see if we can we'll just push on through. Let's see if we can get our lists done, and that way we'll have a clean slate.
Okay, well...
I mean, unless you have like tons left, do you think you
well,
got like
mostly anime. The only ones I had left were my series I wanted to
Okay.
do. And actually, as a
Because
mere
I've got a few left.
is an
but not a lot.
excellent follow-up to the one he just mentioned. As the other one I was sitting on go with the last video we did, and unfortunately we were not able to cover it at the time, was the series Love Live, the School Idol Project,
Ah,
which I did rewatch season 1 and then watch season 2, and I watched the movie, the Love Live, the School Idol movie. And when I saw the first Love Live, I got it on eBay a while back, and I had a sick day. There was a day where I was under the weather. It was rainy. I was like, screw it. I am going to stay home and recuperate. And I popped it in, and the show was so addictive, I watched it in one sitting. It's an incredibly addictive show. It's a very, very, very gorgeously animated. It's colorful. There is some regrettably clunky use of CG in the concert sequences that occasionally, if they had better integrated the CG, the concert sequences would have been very impressive. As it is, they're a mixed bag. But mostly the show is very impressive. The use of CG in the opening theme sequences is not as jarring. It's more, I guess, it works better, I think. And actually, the first opener sequence, I not only love the song, but just that sequence. If we do a list of the best anime openers, it will be a contender for that one.
wow.
It's really good. But when I do have a Hub Pages account, I seldom use it. I very seldom update it. But there is a list on there of anime for specific audiences. And after watching Love Live, I put an addendum to there of the best sick day, rainy day anime. it really
So
is.
it kind of holds up throughout the entirety.
Yes, and Love Live it's not an extraordinarily deep show. It has a little harder time with drama than it does with comedy. It's kind of a slice of life vibe, but the basic gist of it is you have this trio of girls. You've got the exuberant, energetic, slightly dingbat, but not as bad as sometimes in these cases. You have the quiet, studious, serious one, of course. And then you have the sweet, quiet one who, frankly, Kotori is probably the least developed character in of the girls, unfortunately. Honoka, and then the Umi, I think. I'm drawing a blank because it's been a minute, but Honoka's the main character. Basically, their school has been suffering for some time from declining enrollment, and during their sophomore year, they're hit with the news that if they don't get an uptick in admissions by the end of the year, they will be closing. Not until the current freshman class graduates, but that will be the last class. And she doesn't want this to happen. So after kind of throwing her mind back and forth, she hits upon the idea of, let's start an idol group, a school idol group, to get our name out there and save the school. And they start, and they start the ball rolling, and they meet a lot of pushback from the student council, who's under orders from the president not to take extreme measures. Of course, the president happens to be Kotori's mother, so there's sort of like a mixed message there. They start this thing, and one of the most impressive dramatic moments of the series is the first concert. It does not go as you would expect in these kind of series. But it starts the ball rolling, and the concert they did without a name, but then they asked for suggestions, and one person puts in a name of Muse, and it's spelled with like the symbol for the microns or whatever with apostrophe S, but it's pronounced Muse. So this is the band's name. And they eventually bring together 9 members, and you eventually find out the one who named the group is the 9th member, and she said that it had to be 9. She had been working behind the scenes to bring them all together. She's a tarot card reader, and that's like, it was in the cards. So the first series largely revolves around the group getting together and some early kind of, characterization and what have you. Second series focuses more on the actual concert aspect and all this kind of stuff, and also focuses on the big question of what's going to happen when the seniors graduate, which put a big ding in their whole idea of we are a group, And then, unfortunately, the movie basically rehashes the plot of the second season. So it kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the drama that's earned at the end of the second season, and it's basically a fan service fest. Not fan service in the sense of, boobies and that sort of thing, but fan service like for the fans. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like what the fans wanted to hear, to see, to spend time with this group again. It's not nearly as strong as, say, the K-On! Movie or something along those lines. But overall, it's a great group. I actually did watch the Japanese release from Bandai Visual that I got of the movie. And it plays perfectly on an American player. I may have to think about getting more stuff directly from Bandai. I mean, that might be a good way to go for some of these ones that aren't released here. But, yeah.
Maybe.
But anyway, yes, that's my take on that one.
Well, I did have one short that I watched along with the stuff that I was prepared for, and that was The Spider and the Tulip, which is a 1940s animated short that was from Japan, and it really has an old school Disney vibe, which a lot of modern anime does have a big Disney influence to it. Mm-hmm. And this one definitely shows that. It looked like, it really and truly, if I didn't know better, I would have thought this was an old school Disney short from the same era. It's essentially this tale of this ladybug and this spider, and the spider wants to kill the ladybug. So he's trying to convince the ladybug, and when he can't convince her, he tries to attack her, and then, well, we'll let you know whether, you can find out yourself whether he's successful or not. This is an old school cartoon. For those of you who like vintage cartoons from Disney and stuff, you may like this. It may or may not be considered too dark for your kids. Old school cartoons were a little bit darker than the current ones. This ain't your Blue's Clues. But still, it was entertaining enough. It's kind of cool if you're looking for history, and I think it's a good one.
Good deal. All right. And just a quick a note as far as recommendations. Love Live is it's a little saccharine. It does play. I think it probably would play a little better to a. What am I trying to say? Not necessarily your blood, guts, and vengeance crowd, definitely. But it does have surprisingly little fan service. There's very, very little in the way of inappropriate material, so it's a reasonably safe anime. So I do think that's a good thing. It would be a better general recommendation than most. Although season 1 does not have an English dub, so it would be you'd need subs. Yeah. Season 2 apparently has a dub from NIS, but And then a show that is slightly harder to recommend to a general audience was the other show that I watched in its entirety during this time period, and it was the reason why I took a break from Kimi ni Todoke, which was I did watch The Devil as a Part-Timer. And it's a fun little show. It's basically, the gist of it is you have an alternate realm. At the center of the realm is Ente Isla, which is the stronghold of the devil, King Satan. And you also have 4 islands on either side, and basically his 4 generals control each island. And the humans, under the hero Emilia, start decimating these demon armies, and they basically destroy 2, they think 3, of the generals, and the 4th general and the devil retreat through the gate, pursued by Emilia, and find themselves in modern-day Tokyo, Japan. You know, because why not? And, of course, they are immediately mistaken by the cops for performers. And it's a very interesting... The devil is very pragmatic and quick to learn, and very... he surprisingly takes a shine to this realm and decides that he is going to dominate Earth before returning to Ente Isla, and his great stepping stone to success is a part-time job working at McDonald's as a shift manager. And some of the funniest parts in the series have to do with him applying his unique perspective to regular, modern, working-class human things. And then, of course, he has the very cute and impossibly busty coworker Chihiro, who falls madly in love with him and stays in love even though she learns his identity. And Emilia comes to this Earth as well and gets a job in a call center and has to deal with her own brand of mundane human things. And a lot of other characters end up showing up. And it's a very interesting... The 2 of them, the hero and the devil, are at each other's throats, and yet not. And it's very... they have a very unusual relationship, let's put it that way. And overall, I thought it was a really fun series. It does get a little into the fan service at times, and it certainly will be uncomfortable for Christians who might not want to root for the devil.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting series, and I enjoyed it mostly.
Well, let's say that most people who would probably not be uncomfortable with that probably would already be uncomfortable with the fan service.
Yeah.
In a series like that.
Yeah.
I have not seen it all the way. I've seen a couple episodes, but I definitely would like to see it. So who would you recommend it to?
Well, I mean, most general anime fans who are, like, not too picky, I guess, or that's not what I meant to say.
You're not too picky. Hey, it's anime. I guess I'll put that on.
Well, like, you know what I mean. Like, if you're not easily offended, I guess I could say, if you're not one of those people where religious affiliation will dictate what you watch. And one thing that is a big flaw, I think, is that it ends kind of abruptly. It really, and my understanding is that there is a long-running manga. I get the strong impression that you need to read the manga. The anime really does not resolve things. So that's kind of an irritation for me. And if you are someone who really wants to get your story in the anime and be done with it, I probably wouldn't recommend it to you.
So what do you got left? I got 4 left.
All I have left are the anime movies. So
Okay, so the next videos were.
yes, pretty much.
Well, I'll go ahead then and get started on mine, and I guess finish it up if that's all you've got left.
Yeah, I might do one more review for one I had not watched before. That might be a good way to end
Okay,
it.
so I'll do 2,
So, yeah.
you do yours, and I'll do the
Yeah.
last 2, and we'll end it. All right. So the next one is my wife and I finally finished watching Blue Planet 2.
Oh, very good.
Now, this is one that was important because it is in 4K, and it's one of the few that I've watched in 4K on my TV, and it is gorgeous. I think I talked about this a little bit before when I first started watching it, many moons ago. It's not that long. It's just getting her down here, getting interest to watch, and plus because it ends on the somber note with most episodes,
Yeah.
it's a harder thing to get her to get in on. So, and that'll speak to the ending. But it picks up a lot. If you've seen Blue Planet, it's all about the oceans and the life around the ocean, and it's very educational, very cool. You get to see a lot of the wildlife, a lot of the cool things that you find in the ocean. It was well worth the watch. It also informs you of what we are doing to the oceans and how we are destroying them. Now this is where it comes into play with who this would be for.
Yeah.
There are certain people that should not watch this film. These things. One, if you want all of your nature stuff just to be about the nature, and you don't want to be preached to, and you don't want to be depressed, then don't watch this. Because a lot of them end on that note of... They end on a hopeful note, which is good, that things can be reversed.
And I wouldn't call it too preachy.
But it does have a lot of... These things are happening. Every episode pretty much has, these things are happening. Look at this deforestation. Look at this stuff. It does tie it together. If you want to, it does tie it together at the end because there is an end episode about people trying to reverse this, that there are people who are fighting this trend. If you are one of those people who says humans cannot affect their environment and have zero impact on pollution, and all of that talk of pollution is just fake news, you are not the target audience. You will hate this. You will think it's fake, that it's not real. And
You should still watch it, though.
for those of you who don't believe in climate change, you will also probably not watch it because you'll be like, that's not true. This is a natural phenomenon, or God's causing it, or whatever. It's not going to be for you. So keep that in mind. Blue Planet 1 might be more up your speed because it's not as preachy in that aspect. But to me, I think it's important to know this stuff, to understand it, and to understand the importance of it. So who should watch this at the end of the day? I talked about who shouldn't. I think generally everybody else. So pretty much anybody who is moderate in their political beliefs and or to the left in political beliefs should watch this. I think that children should be able to watch this. I think children get a lot out of this. They can learn something. They can get. They can learn about the animals. They can see some cool stuff, beautiful images. But at the end of the day, you gotta keep in mind these little tidbits on that. So just as a fair warning to those of our friends out there that might actually not believe in the pollution aspect, you won't want to watch this. On the other note, I watched a kind of series called Weird Tales. Kino released this series, and I got it because John Candy had a role in it, Martin Short, a lot of those people of that time, and it was a parody of The Twilight Zone. It had 3 or 4 different tales, and each one had just a strange bent. Like there was one that was a guy who got everybody interested in buying and selling real estate, and that was John Candy's one. and things don't work out so well because people are buying and selling so much that it drives prices up. There's one about this Hugh Hefner type guy who ends up that Martin Short's in, and who
Is he the Hugh Hefner guy?
No, he's like a wedding singer type guy, and he discovers this like whole thing of androids. It's not something that is for everybody, but people who like to see these types of older like actors back into things and can appreciate the parody, I think you could get some enjoyment out of it. Though I do think it's a little bit more niche. So most mainstream people probably wouldn't get into it. But still, to me, it was fun.
Okay. Good times. Well, in our, again, I'm not going to go through all of the anime movies I've been watching in preparation for our upcoming list. I don't think I've seen near as many as he has at this point. But I have watched 3 that were new to me. And I've already talked about the Love Lab movie, and we briefly touched on Liz and the Bluebird. The third one, I did want to take just a couple minutes to talk about, and this will be my last big one for the night. I did get a chance finally to watch Makia When the Promised Flower Blooms. And this is a film, of course, that is the directorial debut of Mari Okada. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else she has to come up with. I mean, this is a phenomenal film. It's from a lot of the same people that did Anohana. And just like Anohana, it definitely knows how to tug the heartstrings a little bit.
Oh, I was a little bit teared up at the end of that movie.
Yeah. So the basic gist of it is you have this world in which the old magical aspects of life have been dying out. You have several things have already gone. Do you remember the names of the dragon-like characters? I can't remember offhand. So basically, you have this kingdom of humans who have these dragon-like characters that they have enslaved the last of the races. And they're getting this weird sort of red-eye thing where they basically incinerate themselves from within, and they're dying off. And this kingdom has been using this as a trump card for years. That, hey, we have this under our control, so bow to us. And they're losing them. So they were like, well, what can we do to keep our power? So there's this race of people who are called the Clan of the Separated. They live apart from humans because they're almost immortal. They basically age to 16 or so, and then over the next several hundred years, they'll age a couple more years. And that's pretty much it. And they're called the Lorf, but they're also known as the Clan of the Separated. And these humans decide, we are going to capture us some Lorf and breed with them and create people who last forever, and this will now make us the kingdom that everyone has to bow to. And so they come in and attack this peaceful village and go off with this girl, Liliana, I think her name was, or Lilena or something, and basically force her to marry the prince and bear his child. And Makia gets lost and separated in the confusion. And she comes across a newborn infant whose mother had just been killed and decides, I can't leave it here. So she takes it to raise as her own. And so the bulk of the movie has to deal with this young lady who's 15 at the start of the film and looks maybe 16 at the end of the film. And this child that she raises up into adulthood. And it's not exactly an easy task, let's put it that way. Luckily for them, they do find people who are willing to help them and work with them. And along this, you also have the other woman who's trapped in the castle, who never gets to see her child, who there's a sympathetic guard, but everyone else treats her as a monster, including the prince, who won't even look at her. And, you know, I'm just going to leave it at that. That's the basic setup. It is a phenomenal film. It's worth watching. It actually almost, I would say, it almost was as good. It was almost as good as Mirai. And I think the film got gypped not getting an Oscar nod. But
It
yeah.
was I mean, I think that the relationship between her and her adopted son, the main character, really was the center stage. I thought it was every bit as good. When you talk about Mother's Day films, Wolf Children almost always is the number one. Everybody says Wolf Children, but this one, to me, I think this one is as good, if not better.
Yes,
in a lot of
just
ways.
as much. Yeah.
And it really was one that tugged on the heartstrings. That scene at the very end still chokes me up a little bit at the end. Because this person has to see her child grow up and grow old and die. And that's a hard thing.
Actually, I do want to mention one early scene that was really powerful was this family that she's staying with. They have to say goodbye to their dog that
Yes.
they had been with them.
Well,
for,
that was the teaching moment.
yes, that was the teaching moment. She realized she had been told all her life, don't mix up with humans because you will outlive them. And you will suffer loss and heartbreak because of this. And so she sees firsthand how humans outlive their pets and how heartbroken they were to lose this dog. And it deeply affects her. And, yeah.
Because she knows that's going to
Yeah.
be her. And it is.
Yes.
But yeah, very good film. Who would you recommend it for? General audience?
More or less, but not. I mean, obviously not a really young audience, and again, it's got a lot of action. It's not a super slow film, but it's definitely not a film that it's like it is still kind of a moderate pace, and it definitely. Again, probably would skew more toward the art house crowd than the general crowd. But I do think that it would be one that a wide audience could appreciate.
Well, you know,
And with the high fantasy setting, it might also go to like the Lord of the Rings crowd
Yeah.
and all that kind of thing.
I do think that small children could get something out of this because it's something that can teach about life and death.
True.
So there are valuable lessons to learn. It's just
It's more, would they be able to sit through it?
it's gonna be it'd be hard on them.
Yeah.
I think. So again, it's something that could be utilized for teaching. I'd definitely rather show them that than Grave of the Fireflies for those types of teaching moments.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I have just two more, and it's the end. So one of them was inspired by Mr. Sardonicus because the creepy grin that he has on his face reminded me of another film I had with a creepy grin called The Man Who Laughs, which is an old film, and it is a really good film. It is about this kingdom, and the king ends up capturing this guy who's kind of speaking up against him, this member of royalty. So he basically says, okay, I'm putting you to death, but not only that, I'm going to take your son, I'm going to have him disfigured to the point where he won't be recognized, he'll be shunned for life. So they disfigure this guy so he's always got this grin on his face. And the gypsies that do this were eventually expelled from the land, but he was left behind because they didn't want any evidence of their handiwork. So he's adopted by this traveling philosopher who opens up this traveling circus show. And he is the star. Like this guy, the laughing clown or whatnot. And people are laughing at him all the time when they see him. This is the biggest thing I disagree with. Because if I saw this guy, I would not be laughing. I would be scared out of my wits. He is a creepy looking dude. And
Hey, but clowns are funny.
and this child picks up this this baby that he finds in the cold, and the mother is dead. And he ends up raising her as a child himself. And she, of course, and the child is blind. So she ends up growing into this beautiful woman who is in love with him. And they're not that much older than one another. I think he's like 8 or 9 when he gets her. So, and of course, she can't see the hideous face, so she's not affected by it. Eventually, the royalty finds out that, crap, we're going to lose a lot of our inheritance to this guy once this person gets up. So they have to figure out how to marry their daughter. The new ruling royalty have to figure out a way to marry their daughter to him, or it's going to end up they're going to end up losing everything. And that's really the rub of it. It's a really well done tale, well thought out, kind of a predecessor to Hunchback of Notre Dame in a way. And it is something that is well worth a watch. Any old school film buff should see this film. If you are into makeup and art design, you should see this film. And if you are somebody who appreciates a really strong story, you should see this film. If you do not like slow films, you should not see this film. If you do not like silent films, you should not see this film. And if you do not like old films, you should not see this film.
So, other than the
And not for kids.
other than the visuals, did you see a lot of inspiration for the Joker, or was it mostly just the visuals?
I really think that it's mostly the visuals, because the man himself is not an evil dude. And there is sort of a weird dichotomy between him and Mr. Sardonicus. Well, Sardonicus let his disfigurement turn him into an evil man. Whereas this one, as much as life and society have punished him, he maintained his goodness and his devoutness. So his outward appearance did not match it at all. So I would say, in my mind, the Joker is far better relatable to Mr. Sardonicus than he is to the Man Who Laughs.
Right.
Lastly, there was one series that got its second season on the 18th. That's a series called Agretzko. I watched all of it in a few days because it's fun.
Yeah.
This one continues the trend of the first one. Agretzko, for those of you who do not know it, is by the people who did Hello Kitty, those cutesy things. And it utilizes similar aspects to, like, okay, this is daily office life. So kind of Hello Kitty meets The Office with a little bit more demented nature. And she has got a lot of pent-up aggression and anger, which she then takes out on her music. Again, she finds the love of her life, which is something that happened in the last season. And also, she's dealing with a couple of new characters. One, her mother. And two, her new young co-worker, who is also very passive-aggressive in his way of doing things. We all know that coworker who takes offense really easily, doesn't tell you on the surface, but then starts writing and talking shit about you as time goes on, eventually trying to see if they can get you fired in order to protect themselves. I don't know if you know people like that, but there are definitely people like that out in the world. If you watch this, you will be able to see something. If you've been in the working world at all, you'll see something there. And as they've gone on in this series, they have been adding depth to the characters that they have. And that's kind of cool. As we go on, I think that the characters have little new shades. It's not just her. It's not just Retzko, but a lot of them. I mean, they did some deep diving to the Gossip Girl. And as I get on in the series, most of the characters do not irk me as much as some of them used to. They each have their thing. And Fenico, I don't know. She's just one of those characters. I think I found a Nabiki type character that I actually enjoy. It's because she's not mean. She's got that slight addiction to following other people's Instagram habits, and the way that she does that, just that laugh, the way she does that is just well, not like the creepy Santa Claus one, but it's just it's just hilarious to do it. And the English voice actors are pretty good. Though my wife still considers the way that they make the gory talk is racist because they make her sound more black. But if you can deal with that, I would definitely recommend this. If you've ever worked a job and ever had some misery from that job, you should watch this series. You will enjoy it.
Yeah, I need to see season 2.
But not for kids. Don't show your kids this.
Hello, Panda.
And they're in small bits.
Yes.
They're in really small bits, so it's easily watchable.
Yes, small bits.
So, with that being said, we ran over this time, but I figure this is good. We've managed to catch ourselves up.
Yep.
And next time we shouldn't have nearly as much to talk about, so we'll be able to keep within that hour lineup and look for our preparation video next time.
Yes.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this, and we will see you later.
Bye.
Goodbye.